The early morning sunlight streamed through the windows of Newark International Airport as James Wilson made his way toward Gate C-34. He pulled his carry-on suitcase behind him, dressed in a plain black t-shirt, jeans with a small tear at the knee, and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. Dark circles beneath those eyes told the story of the past 72 hours. Back-to-back meetings, late-night calls to Asia, and the final signing of a deal that would change the tech industry forever. But no one in the bustling airport would have guessed that the tired-looking black man in casual clothes was worth over $11 billion, and that was exactly how James preferred it. "Final boarding call for Flight 1857 to San Francisco," announced a voice over the loudspeaker. James quickened his pace, reaching the gate just as the airline staff were preparing to close the doors. "Just made it," he said with a relieved smile, handing his boarding pass to the gate agent. The agent scanned his ticket. "Yes, sir. You're in first class, seat 2A. Have a pleasant flight." James nodded his thanks and walked down the jet bridge. After 3 days of intense negotiations and barely any sleep, he was looking forward to a quiet flight home. His company headquarters were in San Francisco, and he had meetings scheduled starting tomorrow afternoon. The 5-hour flight would give him a chance to catch up on some much-needed rest. As he stepped onto the plane, a flight attendant with a tight smile greeted him. Her name tag read Patricia Davis. "Welcome aboard," she said automatically, barely looking at him as she checked her tablet. Then her eyes flicked up, taking in his casual attire and worn sneakers. Her smile faded slightly. "Sir, first-class passengers are boarding now." "Economy class is," James interrupted gently. "I'm in first class, seat 2A. Patricia's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose a fraction. "You're in first class?" The skepticism in her voice was impossible to miss. "Yes," James replied calmly, used to these assumptions after years of similar encounters. He held up his boarding pass. Patricia glanced at it with obvious doubt. "May I see that, please?" James handed it to her, maintaining his composure despite the familiar sting of these interactions. Around them, other passengers were boarding, some slowing down to watch the exchange. Patricia studied his boarding pass for longer than necessary before handing it back with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It seems there's no mistake. First class is to your right." "Thank you," James said, taking his boarding pass back and moving toward the front of the plane. As he settled into his spacious seat by the window, James noticed several curious glances from other first-class passengers, mostly older white men in business suits. A few looked surprised, others vaguely uncomfortable. James had seen those looks before, too. He took a deep breath and reminded himself that this was why his work mattered so much. His tech company, Horizon Innovations, wasn't just successful. It was changing the landscape of Silicon Valley by actively recruiting and promoting people of color. His latest project involved creating technology hubs in historically black colleges and universities across the country. The deal he'd just closed would fund the first 5 centers. James stowed his small bag under the seat in front of him, rather than using the overhead compartment. He wanted everything within easy reach so he could work if sleep proved elusive. Taking out his phone, he sent a quick text to his assistant confirming his arrival time in San Francisco. Patricia appeared at his side again, her smile now professionally fixed in place as she addressed the first-class cabin. "Can I offer anyone a pre-flight beverage?" She started with the passengers across the aisle, taking their orders for champagne and orange juice. When she finally turned to James, her smile tightened. "And for you, sir?" The "sir" sounded more like an afterthought than a courtesy. "Just water, please." "No ice," James replied. Patricia nodded curtly and moved on without the friendly chit-chat she'd offered other passengers. James watched her go, then gazed out the window at the ground crew finishing their preparations. He'd learned long ago to pick his battles, and this minor slight wasn't worth his energy. A different flight attendant approached, a younger man whose name tag read Tyler. He placed a bottle of water on James's tray table. "Here you go, sir. No ice as requested." "Thank you, Tyler," James said, noting how the simple act of being addressed by name made him feel more human. Tyler hesitated, then leaned in slightly. "I just wanted to say your TED Talk last year about creating pathways into tech for underprivileged youth changed my brother's life. He joined one of your coding boot camps in Detroit and now works as a junior developer." Surprised and touched, James smiled genuinely for what felt like the first time that day. "That's wonderful to hear. What's your brother's name? I try to keep tabs on our boot camp graduates. Anthony Reynolds, Tyler replied, his face lighting up. He talks about Horizon Innovations like it's the promised land. I remember Anthony, James said, and he actually did. The young man had created an impressive project for his final assessment. He had real talent for database architecture. I'm glad he's doing well. Tyler beamed with pride. He's doing amazing. Our mom cried when he got that job offer. He glanced over his shoulder, noticing Patricia watching them. I should keep moving, but it's an honor to meet you, Mr. Wilson. As Tyler moved away, James noticed Patricia's confused expression. She was clearly trying to place why his name sounded familiar. He took a sip of his water and pulled out his noise-canceling headphones, ready to tune out the world for a few hours. But Patricia wasn't quite finished with him. She approached his seat again, this time with a different demeanor, still professional but with an edge of suspicion. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her voice low. "I need to verify that you're in the correct seat. May I see your boarding pass again?" James looked at her steadily, aware that several nearby passengers were watching the interaction. One older gentleman across the aisle frowned, seeming uncomfortable with the situation. "You've already verified my boarding pass," James replied calmly. Patricia persisted. "It's standard procedure to double-check. Some passengers get confused about their seating assignments." "I'm not confused," James said, his voice level but firm. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." The cabin had grown noticeably quiet. A woman in the row behind James cleared her throat loudly, a small act of solidarity that didn't go unnoticed. Patricia lowered her voice even further. "Sir, first-class tickets are quite expensive. If there's been some kind of misunderstanding—" "There's no misunderstanding," James interrupted, maintaining his composure despite his growing frustration. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet, extracting not just his boarding pass but also his ID and Platinum Airline membership card. "Here are my credentials again." Patricia examined the documents, her eyes widening slightly as she read his executive Platinum status level, the highest tier of the airline's frequent flyer program. Her gaze lingered on his ID, recognition slowly dawning in her eyes. "Mr. Wilson," she said, her tone shifting dramatically as the pieces fell into place. "James Wilson of Horizon Innovations?" James nodded once, taking back his documents. "Yes," Patricia's face flushed. "I apologize for the confusion, sir. It's just that I don't look like what you expected," James finished for her, not unkindly but with unmistakable clarity. He'd had this conversation more times than he could count. Patricia's flush deepened. "That's not what Is there a problem here?" The captain had emerged from the cockpit for his usual pre-flight cabin visit and noticed the tension in the first-class section. "No problem, Captain," James replied, before Patricia could speak. "Just a misunderstanding about seating assignments. It's been resolved." The captain, an older man with salt and pepper hair, looked between them with a practiced neutral expression. "Very good. We're expecting a smooth flight to San Francisco today. Should be taking off in about 10 minutes. As the captain returned to the cockpit, Patricia seemed at a loss for words. She finally managed a stiff, "Please let me know if you need anything during the flight, Mr. Wilson." Before retreating to the galley, James put on his headphones and closed his eyes, trying to let go of the familiar tension these encounters always left in his shoulders. He didn't want to dwell on what had just happened. Instead, he focused on the deal he'd just closed. 5 new tech centers that would give hundreds of young people opportunities they might otherwise never have. Sometimes, the best response to prejudice wasn't a dramatic confrontation but simply continuing the work of making the world better, one project at a time. With that thought in mind, James settled deeper into his seat as the plane began to taxi toward the runway, ready for whatever challenges awaited him in San Francisco. The plane reached cruising altitude, and the seatbelt sign dimmed with a soft chime. James removed his headphones and reclined his seat slightly, still feeling the weight of the earlier interaction. Around him, the first-class cabin hummed with quiet conversations and the occasional clink of ice against glass. Tyler, the friendly flight attendant, moved through the cabin, offering hot towels. When he reached James, he lowered his voice. "Mr. Wilson, I want to apologize for what happened earlier." James accepted the warm towel with a small smile. "You have nothing to apologize for, Tyler." Still, it wasn't right. Tyler hesitated, then added, Patricia's been with the airline for 20 years. She's set in her ways. James nodded, understanding the unspoken message. 20 years meant Patricia had started working for the airline in a different era, when the first-class cabin rarely included people who looked like him. How long have you been flying? James asked, changing the subject. Just under 2 years, Tyler replied. I'm hoping to become a pilot eventually, taking flight lessons on the weekends. That's impressive, James said genuinely. Horizon has a scholarship program for aspiring pilots, you know, especially focused on increasing diversity in the cockpit. Tyler's eyes widened. Really, I had no idea. Look it up when you get home. Applications open next month. James pressed the warm towel against his face, letting the heat ease some of the tension from his temples. Tyler thanked him and continued down the aisle, a new energy in his step. James watched him go, reminded of why he'd built his company the way he had, to create opportunities that might otherwise never exist. Across the aisle, an older white businessman in an expensive suit cleared his throat. James glanced over, expecting another uncomfortable moment. Excuse me, the man said, extending his hand. Richard Thompson, Thompson Financial. I couldn't help overhearing. You're James Wilson? James shook the offered hand. That's right. Your company's growth has been remarkable, Richard said. My firm has been watching Horizon Innovations with great interest. That new chip you developed for AI processing is revolutionary. Thank you, James replied, pleasantly surprised by the professional recognition. We're proud of that technology. You should be. It's changing the game. Richard seemed genuinely impressed. I'd love to talk more about potential investment opportunities if you're open to it. James reached for his phone. Let me give you my CFO's contact information. She handles all our investment relations. As they exchanged information, James noticed Patricia watching from the galley, her expression a mix of confusion and dawning realization. She whispered something to another flight attendant, who looked at James with wide eyes. The news of his identity was spreading through the cabin crew. Richard continued talking about market trends, but James found his attention divided. He'd been in this situation before, the initial dismissal followed by awkward recognition. Sometimes it led to overcompensation, sometimes to stiff formality. Rarely did it lead to genuine understanding. Sure enough, minutes later, Patricia approached his seat again. Her demeanor had completely transformed, the cool dismissiveness replaced by an overly warm smile. Mr. Wilson, I can't apologize enough for the misunderstanding earlier, she said, her voice honeyed with embarrassment. If I had realized who you were, James interrupted gently. That's just it, though, isn't it? You shouldn't need to know who I am to treat me with respect. Patricia's smile faltered. Several nearby passengers pretended not to listen while clearly hanging on every word. Of course, she stammered. I didn't mean to imply. That is, I would never intentionally. I understand, James said, not wanting to prolong her discomfort. We all have our moments. Richard, who had been watching the exchange with interest, spoke up unexpectedly. You know, Mrs. Davis, I've been flying first class with this airline for 15 years, and I've never once been asked to verify my seat assignment after boarding. Patricia's face flushed. Sir, I assure you it's standard procedure to— No, it isn't, Richard interrupted firmly. Let's call it what it was. The tension in the cabin thickened. James hadn't expected an ally, especially not one who looked like the very picture of old money privilege. It's all right, James said quietly. What matters is what we learn from these moments. Patricia seemed at a loss for words. Can I get you anything, Mr. Wilson? Perhaps some champagne? Just a coffee, please, black. James turned back to the window, signaling an end to the conversation. As Patricia hurried away, Richard shook his head. That was gracious of you. More gracious than I might have been, James shrugged. Getting angry rarely changes minds, and I've had plenty of practice handling these situations. I can imagine, Richard replied, though both knew he really couldn't. The remainder of the first hour passed quietly. James sipped his coffee and reviewed some documents on his tablet, while most other passengers either napped or watched movies on their screens. The calm was interrupted when the plane hit a patch of turbulence, causing the seatbelt sign to illuminate again. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking, came a voice over the intercom. We're experiencing some light turbulence. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts. As the plane bounced through rough air, James noticed a young woman clutching her armrests 2 rows ahead, clearly terrified of flying. Tyler approached her, crouching beside her seat to offer reassurance. James was struck by the difference between Tyler's natural compassion and Patricia's practiced customer service. When the turbulence subsided, Patricia made another appearance in the first-class cabin, this time accompanied by an older woman whose uniform and demeanor suggested higher authority. "Mr. Wilson," the older woman said, extending her hand. "I'm Linda Chen, the chief flight attendant today. May I speak with you privately for a moment?" James nodded, unbuckling his seatbelt to follow her to a small empty space near the galley. "I want to personally apologize for any discomfort you experienced earlier," Linda said, her expression genuinely concerned. "It's been brought to my attention that there was an unfortunate misunderstanding during boarding." James appreciated her directness. "Thank you, but it's really not necessary to make this a bigger issue." Linda's eyes were kind but serious. "Actually, Mr. Wilson, it is necessary. Our airline prides itself on treating all passengers with dignity and respect. What happened doesn't reflect our values." James studied her face, sensing sincerity. "I appreciate that. I've spoken with Patricia," Linda continued. "She's mortified by her behavior, especially now that she trailed off. Now that she knows I'm not just some guy who wandered into first class by mistake." James finished for her. Linda had the grace to look embarrassed. "Yes, though that's part of the problem, isn't it? It shouldn't matter who you are." "No, it shouldn't," James agreed. "But we both know it often does." Linda nodded thoughtfully. "This is why our diversity training program needs updating. We're working on it, but clearly not fast enough." Something about her comment sparked an idea in James's mind, but before he could pursue it, the plane shuddered again with turbulence. "I should get back to my duties," Linda said. "But please, if there's anything we can do to improve your flight experience, just ask." James returned to his seat, finding that Richard had fallen asleep. Across the aisle, a young Asian woman in a business suit gave him a small smile of solidarity. James returned the smile, feeling a familiar weariness settle over him. It was always the same cycle: prejudice, recognition, embarrassment, apology. Rarely did it lead to actual change. For all the progress made, these moments still happened with depressing regularity. James took out his notebook and began jotting down some thoughts. His company's foundation had funded various diversity initiatives over the years, but maybe it was time for something more targeted. The airline industry, with its unique intersection of global cultures and socioeconomic classes, could benefit from a comprehensive approach. As he wrote, Tyler passed by and noticed his intense concentration. "Working hard even at 30,000 feet, Mr. Wilson?" he said with a friendly smile. "Just had an idea I don't want to lose," James replied. "Sometimes inspiration strikes in unexpected places." Tyler nodded. "My brother says that's how you built your company, by seeing opportunities others missed." "Your brother's giving me too much credit," James said with a chuckle. But there is something to be said for paying attention to problems that need solving. As Tyler moved on, James continued writing, his mind racing with possibilities. Perhaps what happened today wasn't just an unpleasant interaction, but an opportunity for meaningful change. The airline served millions of passengers from all walks of life. What if? The seatbelt sign chimed off again, and Patricia appeared with lunch menus. Her hands trembled slightly as she handed one to James. "Our chef has prepared a special selection today," she said, her voice overly formal. "The salmon is particularly recommended." "Thank you," James said simply, accepting the menu. As Patricia moved to the next passenger, James noticed her steal a glance at his notebook. He'd written Airline Industry Diversity Initiative at the top of the page in bold letters. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition that this story wasn't over yet. James turned back to his notes, a plan already forming in his mind. By the time this flight landed in San Francisco, he would have the outline for something that might turn today's uncomfortable moment into tomorrow's positive change. Sometimes, he reflected, the best comeback wasn't a cutting remark or public humiliation. Sometimes, the best comeback was creating something lasting that would prevent others from experiencing what you had endured. With that thought, James continued writing as the plane soared westward, carrying him closer to home and to the next chapter of this unexpected story. Lunch service was almost finished when the captain's voice came over the intercom again, announcing they were flying over Colorado. James had eaten little of his meal, too focused on the notes covering several pages of his notebook. His idea had grown from a vague concept into something with real potential, a comprehensive training program that could transform how airlines approach diversity and inclusion. More coffee, Mr. Wilson? Tyler appeared at his side with a fresh pot. Please. James closed his notebook as Tyler filled his cup. Tyler, can I ask you something? Of course. The young flight attendant looked pleased to be singled out. In your training, how much time was dedicated to cultural sensitivity and bias awareness? Tyler considered this. Maybe half a day? It was mostly videos from the early 2000s, to be honest. And was there any follow-up training after you started flying? Just annual reminders in our online training portal. Nobody really pays attention to those. Tyler lowered his voice. Most of what I know about handling diverse passengers came from watching the more experienced attendants. Like Patricia? James asked with a raised eyebrow. Tyler winced slightly. Well, she's excellent with our regular business travelers. Very efficient. James nodded, reading between the lines. And who designs these training programs? The corporate office, I guess. I've never met anyone who works in that department. Have you ever been asked for feedback about how to improve passenger experiences? Tyler laughed softly. They send surveys to passengers, but they never ask us what we see day to day. This confirmed what James suspected. The airline's approach to diversity training was outdated and disconnected from real experiences. It was exactly the kind of problem his company excelled at solving. Thank you, Tyler, that's helpful. As Tyler moved on, Richard stirred from his nap and stretched. I couldn't help overhearing. You're thinking about the airline's training programs? Just exploring an idea, James replied, sipping his coffee. Richard looked intrigued. The airline industry is notoriously slow to innovate in anything but safety protocols. They're still using systems designed in the 1980s for many operations. That matches what I've seen in their technology infrastructure, James agreed. My company bid on a modernization project for this airline last year, but they went with a cheaper option. Classic mistake, Richard said. Going cheap on technology always costs more in the long run. Their conversation was interrupted when Linda, the chief flight attendant, approached again. Mr. Wilson, our captain asked me to extend a personal invitation. He'd like to speak with you in the cockpit before we begin our descent into San Francisco. James looked surprised. That's very kind, but is that allowed with the security protocols? The captain has discretion to invite passengers for brief visits. It's not uncommon for distinguished travelers. Linda's expression suggested there was more to the invitation than simple courtesy. In that case, I'd be happy to, James replied, curiosity piqued. Richard chuckled as Linda walked away. The word has definitely spread about who's on board. I'd bet good money the captain looked you up after hearing about the incident. James shrugged. Fame has its occasional uses, I suppose. More than occasional. Look around you. Richard gestured subtly to the cabin. James noticed that the atmosphere had changed. Patricia was now keeping her distance, but other crew members found reasons to pass by his seat. Passengers who had ignored him earlier now stole glances his way. The invisible wall that had separated him from the typical first-class experience had evaporated. It shouldn't take being recognized to be treated with dignity, James said quietly. No, it shouldn't, Richard agreed. But you're in a unique position to do something about it. An hour later, James followed Linda to the cockpit. The captain, a tall man with gray hair at his temples, stood to greet him. Mr. Wilson, I'm Captain Robert Brown. It's an honor to have you on board. He extended his hand. James shook it firmly. The honor is mine. Not many people get to see what happens behind this door. Captain Brown smiled. It's a bit less dramatic than most people imagine. This is my first officer, David Lee. The younger pilot nodded respectfully from his seat. Sir, please call me James. Captain Brown gestured to the jump seat. We're about 40 minutes from beginning our descent. I wanted a chance to speak with you briefly. As James settled into the seat, he was struck by the cockpit's complexity. Hundreds of controls and displays monitoring every aspect of the massive aircraft. Impressive setup, he remarked. It is, though some of our systems are overdue for upgrades, Captain Brown replied. But that's not why I asked to speak with you. The captain's expression turned serious. I understand there was an unfortunate incident during boarding. James waved a hand dismissively. It's been addressed. No need to dwell on it. I disagree, Captain Brown said firmly. What happens on my aircraft reflects on my command, and I take that seriously. James studied the captain's face, seeing genuine concern rather than corporate damage control. The issue goes beyond one interaction, Captain Brown continued. I've been flying for 27 years, and I've seen how slow the industry has been to reflect the diversity of the passengers we serve. The cockpit being a prime example, James noted, glancing between the two white male pilots. Exactly, Captain Brown agreed without defensiveness. When I started, I could count the number of black captains on one hand. It's better now, but not by much, and female pilots are still less than 7% of the total. First Officer Lee spoke up. My parents wanted me to be a doctor. When I told them I was going to flight school, my mother cried. There were no pilots who looked like me when she was growing up. James nodded, understanding perfectly. Representation matters. It does, Captain Brown said. Linda mentioned you were taking notes about diversity initiatives. I hope that means you're considering some involvement with our airline. James raised an eyebrow. You've been well briefed, Captain. When a tech billionaire who revolutionized Silicon Valley's approach to diversity starts writing notes after experiencing discrimination on my flight, I pay attention, the captain replied with a slight smile, especially when that billionaire's company owns a significant amount of our airline's stock. So they knew about his company's investments too. James couldn't help but be impressed by the captain's thoroughness. I was just exploring some ideas, James said carefully. Nothing concrete yet. Well, if those ideas develop into something more, I'd like to be involved, Captain Brown said. Change has to happen at all levels, from the boardroom to the cabin crew to the cockpit. James felt a surge of optimism. Here was someone with authority who genuinely wanted to see improvement, not just manage a PR problem. I'll keep that in mind, Captain. Thank you. As James returned to his seat, he noticed Patricia serving drinks in the main cabin. She avoided eye contact as he passed, clearly still uncomfortable after their earlier interactions. James made a split-second decision and paused beside her. Patricia, he said quietly. She looked up, her expression guarded. Yes, Mr. Wilson? I'd like to speak with you before we land, if that's possible. Her face paled slightly. Of course. I'll find a moment. James returned to his seat, aware that his request had probably sparked fear. Flight attendants could lose their jobs over passenger complaints, especially from influential travelers. But firing Patricia wasn't his goal. That wouldn't create lasting change. Richard gave him a curious look. Plotting your revenge? James shook his head. Just the opposite. For the next half hour, James refined his notes, creating a rough outline for a comprehensive program that would address the airline industry's diversity challenges. His company had developed similar initiatives for tech firms, but this would need to be customized for the unique environment of air travel. Eventually, Patricia approached his seat, her professional mask firmly in place but tension visible in her shoulders. You wanted to speak with me, Mr. Wilson? Yes, could you sit for a moment? He gestured to the empty seat beside him. Patricia glanced around nervously. I'm not supposed to... It's important, James said. Please. Reluctantly, Patricia perched on the edge of the seat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I'm not filing a complaint against you, James said directly, watching relief flood her face. That's not my style. Thank you, she whispered. I truly am sorry for how I treated you. I believe you, James replied. But I'm more interested in what happens next. Patricia looked confused. Next? Tell me something, Patricia. In your 20 years of flying, how many times have you received meaningful training on recognizing and addressing unconscious bias? She blinked, clearly surprised by the question. Well, we have the annual online modules, the ones no one pays attention to, according to Tyler. A small smile flickered across her face. He's not wrong. What if there was a better way? James asked. A program designed with input from people who actually do the job day to day? Patricia's expression shifted from confusion to cautious interest. What kind of program? I'm developing an idea for a comprehensive initiative that would transform how airlines approach diversity and inclusion, James explained. Not just videos and slideshows, but real engagement with the challenges you face when dealing with people from all walks of life, all cultures, all backgrounds. And you want my input on this? Patricia asked incredulously. More than that, James said. I want you to be part of it. Patricia stared at him. After how I treated you, why would you want my involvement? James leaned forward slightly. Because change doesn't happen by excluding people who've made mistakes. It happens by including them in the solution. For the first time, Patricia seemed to truly see him, not as a passenger who didn't fit her expectations, not as a billionaire who could end her career, but as a person offering a genuine opportunity for growth. I don't know what to say, she admitted. You don't need to decide right now, James said. Think about it. We'll be landing soon and I have meetings tomorrow. But here's my card. He handed her his business card. Call that number next week if you're interested. Patricia took the card with slightly trembling fingers, staring at it as though it were made of gold. Why me? She asked again. You could work with anyone at the airline, James smiled. Sometimes the most powerful advocates for change are the people who've seen firsthand why it's needed. The captain's voice came over the intercom, announcing their initial descent into San Francisco. Patricia stood quickly, tucking James's card into her pocket. I need to prepare the cabin for landing, she said, her voice steadier now. Thank you, Mr. Wilson. I'll think about it. As she walked away, Richard leaned over. That was unexpected. What exactly are you planning? James smiled. Something better than revenge. 3 weeks later, James sat in his corner office in downtown San Francisco, looking out at the fog rolling in from the bay. The view from the 32nd floor of Horizon Tower was spectacular, but his mind was elsewhere. On his desk sat a folder labeled Sky Equality Initiative, the project born from his experience on that flight. His assistant's voice came through the intercom. Mr. Wilson, your 2 o'clock appointment is here. James straightened his tie. Send them in, please. The door opened to reveal Patricia Davis, looking very different from when he'd last seen her. Gone was the airline uniform, replaced by a navy blue pantsuit. She appeared both nervous and determined as she entered his office. Ms. Davis, thank you for coming. James stood and extended his hand. Please, have a seat. Thank you for inviting me, Patricia replied, shaking his hand firmly before sitting across from him. Though I'm still not entirely sure why I'm here, James smiled. Did you read the materials I sent over? I did several times, she hesitated. It's an ambitious project. It is, James agreed, and potentially transformative for the airline industry. But it will only work if we have the right people involved. Patricia shifted in her seat. And you think I'm one of those people? After what happened? Especially after what happened, James said. This isn't about punishing past mistakes. It's about creating future solutions. He opened the folder on his desk, revealing a detailed outline for a comprehensive diversity and inclusion program specifically designed for airlines. In the 3 weeks since our flight, my team has been developing this initiative. We've consulted with diversity experts, airline executives, and industry regulators. What's missing is the perspective of frontline staff, the people who interact with passengers every day. Patricia leaned forward slightly to look at the documents. And that's where I come in? Potentially. James watched her reaction carefully. I've spoken with your airline CEO. They're interested in being the pilot program for this initiative, but they're letting me choose the internal coordinator. Patricia's eyes widened. You want me to coordinate this program? For the entire airline? If you're interested, James replied. It would mean taking a temporary leave from your flight duties to work on implementation. Full salary plus a stipend from my foundation. Patricia sat back, clearly stunned. I don't understand. Why would you trust me with this? James considered his words carefully. Do you know what I look for when hiring people at Horizon? She shook her head. Not just skills or experience, but the capacity for growth. People who can learn from mistakes and become stronger because of them. James leaned forward. What happened on that flight was unfortunate, but how you respond to it defines who you are. Patricia was quiet for a long moment. I've been flying for 20 years, she finally said. After what happened with you, I couldn't stop thinking about other passengers over the years. How many people I might have judged unfairly without even realizing it. She looked directly at James. I'm not proud of that. Self-awareness is the first step toward change, James said. Not everyone gets there. The day after our flight, I started researching your company, Patricia continued. What you've done to change Silicon Valley's approach to diversity, it's remarkable. When you offered me your card, I thought it was just a polite gesture. I never imagined this, James smiled. Sometimes the most powerful voices for change come from unexpected places. Patricia picked up one of the documents from his desk, a draft training module on recognizing unconscious bias. This is really good, she said, scanning the content. But it's missing something important. What's that? Personal stories. Real examples. She set the document down. Numbers and studies matter, but what really changes people is hearing about real experiences from people they can relate to. James nodded, impressed. Exactly what our curriculum developer said. We need authentic voices. Patricia straightened in her seat, a new confidence in her posture. If I take this position, I want to do more than just coordinate. I want to help develop the content. I have 20 years of stories, good and bad, that could make this training real for people. That's precisely why you're here, James replied. This isn't about checking boxes or fulfilling corporate requirements. It's about creating genuine understanding. For the next hour, they discussed the initiative in detail. Patricia offered insights from her years of experience, pointing out practical challenges that James's team of experts had missed. Her initial nervousness faded as she engaged with the material, revealing a sharp mind and genuine passion for improvement. As their meeting wound down, James's assistant knocked and entered with a tray of coffee. Thank you, Michael, James said as his assistant set the tray down. Miss Davis, how do you take your coffee? Black is fine, she replied. When they were alone again, Patricia asked the question that had clearly been on her mind. What made you decide to create this program instead of filing a complaint against me? Most people in your position would have demanded I be fired. James considered this as he stirred his coffee. When I was building Horizon, I faced countless moments like what happened on that plane. People assuming I was in the wrong room, security guards following me through my own building, potential investors speaking to my white employees instead of to me. He set his spoon down. Early on, I wanted to prove everyone wrong. I wanted to succeed just to show them how wrong they were. But over time, I realized something important. What was that? Patricia asked. That changing individual minds one by one would take forever, but changing systems can affect thousands of lives. James gestured to the documents between them. This program won't just impact you or me. It will touch every employee at your airline and potentially millions of passengers. Patricia nodded slowly. It's the difference between winning an argument and solving a problem. Exactly, James said, impressed by her insight. And solving problems is what I do best. Patricia's phone buzzed with a text message. She checked it quickly. That's Captain Brown. He's waiting downstairs to drive me back to the airport. He's been very supportive of this initiative, James noted. The whole crew has been talking about it, Patricia admitted. Tyler is hoping to be part of the youth outreach component. James smiled. His enthusiasm would be perfect for that. As they stood to conclude the meeting, Patricia extended her hand again. Mr. Wilson, I want you to know I won't let you down. This opportunity, it means more than I can say. James shook her hand firmly. I know you won't, and please call me James. As James walked Patricia to the elevator, they passed through the main floor of Horizon Innovations. The space bustled with energy, a diverse team of employees working in a space designed to foster collaboration and creativity. Your company feels different, Patricia observed. Everyone seems so engaged. That's by design, James replied. We believe that different perspectives make us stronger. It's not just a slogan on the wall, it's how we operate every day. The elevator arrived and Patricia stepped in. As the doors began to close, she held them open for a moment. You know, the day of our flight, after you gave me your card, I looked you up online, read about your journey. And? James asked. And I realized that what happened on that plane was just one small moment in a lifetime of similar moments for you. Her eyes held genuine remorse. I'm truly sorry I added to that burden. What matters isn't that it happened, James said. What matters is what we do next. The elevator doors closed and James walked back to his office feeling a sense of satisfaction. In 3 days, he would present the Sky Equality Initiative to the airline's board of directors with Patricia by his side. The program would likely face resistance from some quarters. Meaningful change always did. But he had learned long ago that the most powerful response to prejudice wasn't anger or retribution. It was creation, building something new that made the old ways obsolete. Back in his office, James noticed a new email from Richard Thompson, the businessman from the flight. The investment discussions between Thompson Financial and Horizon had progressed rapidly in the weeks since they'd met. "Meeting you on that flight was fortuitous timing," Richard had written. "Your approach to that uncomfortable situation told me more about your leadership style than any balance sheet could have. Looking forward to finalizing our partnership next week," James smiled. Sometimes the universe had a way of turning negative encounters into unexpected opportunities. His phone rang, the CEO of the airline calling to confirm tomorrow's meeting. As James answered, he looked at the folder on his desk. What had begun as a simple idea scribbled on a plane was about to become a reality that could change an entire industry. The true power of a comeback wasn't in the moment of confrontation. It was in the lasting change that followed. 6 months later, James found himself back at Newark International Airport, this time standing in a conference room overlooking the busy terminal. Behind him, rows of chairs were quickly filling with airline employees, journalists, and industry representatives. A banner stretched across the wall read, "Sky Equality Initiative Launch Day." "Nervous?" asked Linda Chen, who had been promoted to Director of Cabin Crew Training in the months since their flight together. "A little," James admitted. "Big moments deserve a little nervousness," Linda smiled. "Wait until you see Patricia. She's changed her outfit 3 times this morning." As if on cue, Patricia entered the room looking polished in a tailored suit with the airline's colors. She carried a tablet and moved with purpose, stopping to direct staff and greet attendees. The woman who had once questioned James's right to be in first class now commanded the room with confidence. "Mr. Wilson," she said, approaching them, "everything's ready. We'll begin in 15 minutes. Perfect. And remember, it's still just James." Patricia smiled. "Old habits. The CEO just arrived. He's bringing the Secretary of Transportation with him." James raised an eyebrow. "That wasn't on the schedule." "Apparently your program has caught Washington's attention," Patricia replied. "The department is considering making elements of it mandatory for all U.S. carriers." Linda excused herself to handle the new arrivals, leaving James and Patricia alone for a moment. "How are you feeling?" James asked. Patricia took a deep breath. "Like a different person than I was 6 months ago." She glanced around at the gathering crowd. "I never imagined I'd be here doing this." "You've earned it," James said sincerely. "This program wouldn't exist without your insights." "It wouldn't exist without your response to how I treated you," Patricia countered. "Most people would have demanded my job." James shrugged. "That would have solved nothing." "Well, your approach has certainly solved something." Patricia gestured toward the back of the room, where a group of new flight attendants were entering, a visibly diverse group representing various backgrounds, ages, and ethnicities. "That's our newest training class. Applications from people of color are up 60% since we announced this initiative." James watched the young trainees, feeling a sense of pride. That's what real change looks like. A staff member approached to let them know they were ready to begin. James moved toward the podium while Patricia took her place in the front row. The room quieted as James adjusted the microphone. Camera lights blinked on as reporters prepared to cover the launch. "Good morning," James began. "Thank you all for being here today. 6 months ago, I boarded a flight from this very airport and experienced something that many travelers face every day, being judged not by who I am, but by how I look." He paused, letting his gaze sweep across the room. That moment could have ended in many ways. A complaint filed, a job lost, an angry exchange forgotten by everyone except those directly involved. Instead, it sparked a conversation that grew into what we're launching today. The Sky Equality Initiative, a comprehensive approach to transforming how the airline industry addresses diversity, equity, and inclusion. In the front row, Patricia sat straight-backed and attentive, nodding slightly at his words. The genius of this program isn't in its concepts, which build on decades of research and best practices. It's in its implementation, created by the very people who will use it every day. Flight attendants, pilots, gate agents, and ground crew have all contributed their experiences and insights to build something truly revolutionary. James gestured to Patricia. "I'd like to invite Patricia Davis to the podium." As the director of our new program, she'll walk you through the details." Patricia joined him at the podium, accepting a round of applause with graceful confidence. "When Mr. Wilson and I first met," she began, "I made assumptions about him based solely on his appearance. It wasn't my finest moment." A ripple of knowing laughter moved through the crowd. But what followed was remarkable. Instead of demanding punishment, he offered partnership. Instead of highlighting a problem, he proposed a solution. She tapped her tablet, and the screen behind them lit up with the program's logo. "The Sky Equality Initiative has 4 core components," she continued. "First, experiential training that goes beyond slideshows to create real understanding. Second, ongoing mentorship that pairs employees across different backgrounds. Third, structural changes to how we operate, from hiring practices to customer service protocols. And fourth, accountability measures that track our progress and adjust our approach as needed." As Patricia detailed each component, James watched the room. The CEO nodded approvingly. The Secretary of Transportation leaned forward, clearly interested. Journalists scribbled notes. But most importantly, the airline staff, the people who would actually implement these changes, were fully engaged. When Patricia finished her presentation, James rejoined her for the question and answer session. The questions came rapidly, some skeptical, some enthusiastic, all thoughtful. A veteran pilot asked, "How do we know this isn't just another corporate diversity program that looks good in the press, but changes nothing on the ground?" Patricia answered before James could. "Because it's not being imposed from above. It's built from within, by the people who do the work every day. And because it includes specific, measurable outcomes that will be publicly reported every quarter. Transparency drives accountability." A young journalist raised her hand. "Mr. Wilson, your company is investing millions in this initiative with no obvious financial return." "Why?" James considered his answer carefully. "Some investments can't be measured in quarterly profits. My company succeeds because we believe diverse perspectives create better solutions. This initiative extends that philosophy to an entire industry. The return isn't just financial, it's human." The questions continued for nearly an hour. Throughout, James noticed how seamlessly he and Patricia worked together, a partnership that would have seemed impossible 6 months earlier. As the formal presentation concluded, attendees moved to an adjoining room for refreshments and networking. James found himself surrounded by airline executives eager to discuss implementing similar programs at their companies. Across the room, he spotted a familiar face. Tyler, the friendly flight attendant from that memorable flight, now wearing a training coordinator badge. Beside him stood Captain Brown, deep in conversation with the Secretary of Transportation. "Your approach is spreading," said a voice beside him. James turned to find Richard Thompson, who had flown in specifically for the launch. "That was the goal," James replied with a smile. "How's our investment partnership working out?" "Extremely well," Richard said. "Your prediction about the AI chip market was spot on. Our fund is up 23% since we finalized the deal." "Good to hear." Richard gestured toward Patricia, who was surrounded by reporters. "She's a natural leader. Hard to believe she's the same person you told me about." "People can surprise you when given the right opportunity," James said. "Speaking of opportunities," Richard lowered his voice, "I heard a rumor that the White House is forming a task force on transportation equity. They're looking for private sector leaders with proven success in this area." James raised an eyebrow. "Interesting. Just thought you should know," Richard said with a meaningful look. "Your comeback might have bigger ripples than you imagined." As Richard moved away, Linda approached with an older black man in a pilot's uniform. "James, I'd like you to meet Captain William Harris. He was one of the first black pilots hired by the airline in 1985. The older pilot shook James's hand firmly. "What you've started here matters, son. I've spent 38 years watching this industry take baby steps toward equality. Today feels like a giant leap." "That means a lot coming from you, Captain," James replied. "You paved the way long before I came along." "Different paths, same journey," Captain Harris said. "My generation fought to get in the door. Yours is redesigning the whole building." As the event wound down, James found a quiet moment with Patricia near the window overlooking the runways. "Congratulations," he said. "You were magnificent today." Patricia smiled, watching a plane take off into the blue sky. 6 months ago, I thought my career was over. Now I'm leading the biggest initiative in the company's history. Life takes unexpected turns. It does. She turned to face him. You know what the most surprising part has been? What's that? Discovering that I love this work. Really love it. Seeing people change the way I've changed, it's addictive. James nodded. That's how movements start. One person changes, then helps others change. We've already had inquiries from 3 other airlines and 2 hotel chains, Patricia said. They want to adapt our program for their industries. That was always the hope, that this would spread beyond one airline or one incident. Patricia checked her watch. The media interviews start in 5 minutes. Are you ready? Almost, James said. There's something I wanted to ask you first. Yes? The training center we're building in Chicago. We need someone to run it full-time. Someone who understands both the airline industry and our mission. Someone who's lived this journey. Patricia's eyes widened. Are you offering me the position? It would mean relocating, but it's a permanent role with the foundation. Complete control over curriculum development. Yes, Patricia said without hesitation. Absolutely yes. As they walked back to join the others, James reflected on the journey that had brought them here. What had begun as an uncomfortable moment on a plane had transformed into something neither of them could have imagined. Sometimes the most powerful response to prejudice wasn't anger or revenge. It was creating something new, something that made the world a little better than you found it. Outside, a plane bearing the airline's colors soared into the sky, carrying hundreds of passengers from all walks of life. Among the crew would be people who had gone through the new training program, approaching their work with new awareness and understanding. One flight, one moment, one choice to respond with creation rather than destruction, and thousands of lives changed as a result. As James prepared to face the cameras and tell their story again, he knew that this ripple effect of positive change was the true meaning of a comeback that shocked everyone. Not because it was dramatic or vengeful, but because it replaced an old story with a new and better one.